From stage 2, we have strict precautions, to stage 3, we have moderate precautions. We have exception of Walvis Bay, followed by the Erongo region, where Walvis Bay is, for which it became necessary to revert to stage 1 lockdown on 8th of June 2020. The decision is consistent with our considered national policy position for targeted and localized responses to manage cluster outbreaks or suspected community transmissions. The stage 1 lockdown of Erongo region will lapse at midnight tonight, Monday, 22nd June 2020. The remaining 13 regions are due to migrate from stage 3 to stage 4 at midnight on Monday, 29th June 2020, that is next week. I will now proceed to highlight key measures that will become applicable for the Erongo region from midnight tonight, Monday, 22nd June 2020. Mindful of the adverse effects caused by a full lockdown on businesses, households, and livelihoods, and considering the region's capacity to respond to rising numbers of infection, the Erongo region will migrate from stage 1 to stage 3 at midnight tonight, Monday, 22nd June 2020, until midnight on Monday, 6 July 2020, for an initial period of 14 days or one incubation cycle. 2, travel between towns in Erongo region and to the rest of the country will be permitted with exception of the Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arande local authority areas. Considering the linkages and movement of labor between the towns of Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arandes, travel between these local authorities will be permitted. However, travel into and out of these local authorities areas to the rest of the country is highly discouraged and will be restricted to emergency situations only, as defined in the regulations. Bearing in mind that the disease does not move by itself, but through human carriers, all residents are strongly urged to avoid unnecessary travel during this period and allow authorities to conduct the active case search at these 2 towns in effort to determine the extent or spread of disease into the community. 3, essential services providers, as defined in the regulations, and truck drivers will be permitted to travel into and out of the region on the basis of an authorized permit. To avoid local truck drivers mixing with cross-border truck drivers, the Ministry of Urban and Rural Development, in conjunction with the Ministry of Health and Social Services, are directed to identify separate truck ports and parking areas at Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arandes local authority areas. Local truck drivers are to be escorted by law enforcement officials to and from their respective delivery destinations. 4, public gatherings at Erongo region will be restricted to 50 persons, with exception of Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, Arandes local authority areas, which will be restricted to gatherings of 10 persons only. 5, education. Schools across the Erongo region that meet the COVID-19 compliance standards may resume face-to-face instruction for grade 11 and 12. 4 Wolf's Bay, Swakopmund and Arantes local authority areas. The resumption of grades 11 to 12 and pre-primary grades 0 to 3 remains suspended for the next 14 days. Face-to-face instruction will be determined pending observation of the unfolding situation in those 3 towns. 6. Vulnerable persons in categories as defined will be permitted to work from home at Erongo region, subject to authorization issued by the employer and upon presentation of valid medical certificate. Old age homes should remain under isolation and caregivers should strictly adhere to the health and hygiene protocols. As I conclude the Erongo specific response, I reiterate that it has been a complex undertaking to draw a balance between protecting lives and supporting livelihoods. Government's approach to further relax national restrictions under Stage 4 aims to boost social and economic activities while continuing to advocate for intensified public adherence to health and hygiene protocols so as to safeguard our successes. We have added an additional Stage 5, estimated from 18 September 2020, to address exclusively the opening of points of entry and resumption of air travel. Fellow Namibians, I hereby announce the following measures that will apply to all residents across 13 regions of the country, remaining 13 regions. 1, Namibia will migrate from Stage 3 to Stage 4 with relaxed precautions on 30 June to 17 September 2020 for an extended 10-week period. 2, points of entry will remain closed except for the transportation of imported goods. Government, in collaboration with the tourism and hospitality sector, will conduct a targeted international tourism revival initiative between 15 July and 15 August 2020. This initiative will look to accommodate a limited number of tourists who will be determined in consultation with the private sector from a carefully selected low-risk markets that have potential to contribute towards our tourism sector that employ over 100,000 Namibians. Modalities for this initiative will be announced in coming weeks, and this trial will inform and strengthen public sector preparations for the imminent reopening of points of entry under Stage 5. 3, travel-related quarantine as from 30 June 2020. All Namibians and non-Namibians entering the country must submit to COVID-19 PCR tests on arrival and mandatory government supervision quarantine at own cost. Only citizens who cannot afford to quarantine at own cost, as will be defined in directives, can apply to be quarantined at government cost. 4, the size of public gatherings will increase to 250 people for social gatherings, including weddings, funerals, and religious gatherings. Members of the public must strictly adhere to the health and hygiene protocols. 5, education. The resumption of pre-primary, that is grades 0 to 3, is hereby deferred for a period of 2 weeks across all 14 regions until Monday, 6 July 2020. The Ministry of Education will provide an update schedule to the public. government risk mitigation strategy for the resumption of face-to-face schooling is consistent with guidelines prescribed by World Health Organization. In the event of people or staff member present COVID-19 related symptoms or test positive, the school will be suspended for a period of 14 days and trace contacts will be placed under quarantine. I wish to make use of this opportunity to reassure parents and guardians who are understandably anxious about the decision to send their children back to school during a time of great uncertainty. According to the evidence before us, the consequences of not resuming learning following a long disruption to the academic calendar can have lasting and undesirable consequences on the academic progression of our children. I also emphasize that return of learners to class is voluntary. Return to class of learners is voluntary. Parents may decide to keep their children home and assume responsibility for homeschooling. Our schools should therefore not employ coercive or punitive measures against parents who decide not to initially resume face-to-face instructions. 6, government will continue to strengthen public health response measures through surveillance, testing, contact tracing, and isolation of confirmed cases, and by intensifying public education. As I have repeatedly stated on a number of occasions, life of Namibians is of our greatest priority. However, in our quest to protect life today and tomorrow, we must safeguard our economy by mitigating the negative impacts of COVID-19 related restrictions. It is for these reasons, under Stage 4, measures have been further relaxed to facilitate social and economic activities. While COVID-19 may remain in our midst and in our communities for the foreseeable future, we must do everything to keep it out of our homes and out of our lives by applying strict health and hygiene precautions. Personal responsibility and vigilance are ever more important under this stage of relaxed precaution. By wearing a mask, like I do, washing your hands, and practicing social distancing, you are contributing, if you do those things, you are contributing greatly to our fight against COVID-19. Our collective endurance is being tested, and we must summon the strength to persevere. There is no need to play a blame game. Let us hold hands and fight this invisible enemy. I thank you. I have Vice President, I have the ministers, Prime Minister, Key Minister, all the ministers are here who could be asked questions. We're even going to recruit the U.S. representative who is always with us. We thank you for that. And who is, it's not him, it's him. Yeah, but we cannot see people of these things. Awkward. So the floor is open, unless somebody wants to add. Want to add? Okay, Minister.
Thank you very much, Comrade President. I'm going to announce the guidelines to operationalize the decisions as have been announced by His Excellency the President. On Monday, the 29th of June 2020, at exactly 23 hours and 55 minutes. 13 regions, with the exception of the Orongo region, will transit from stage 3 to stage 4 until the 17th of September 2020 for an extended 10-week period. Orongo region will migrate from stage 1 to stage 3 at 23:59 minutes on Monday, 22nd June 2020, until the 6th of July 2020 for a period of 14 days or one incubation cycle, with a special dispensation for Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arandes local authority areas. The observance period will be monitored on a weekly basis and may be reduced or extended, subject to changes in the country epidemiological situation. Standard health and hygiene guidelines. A relaxation in restrictions requires heightened vigilance and responsibility at personal, community, and organizational levels. The public is urged to adhere to the following guidelines. 1. Continue physical distancing protocols of at least 1 meter between persons to minimize the risk of infection. 2. Each person is required to wear a face mask as defined in the regulations when using both private and public transport, shopping, outdoor group exercise, public space, and at the workplace. 3. Increase hygiene interventions, for example, public hand washing utilities and consumables, including installation of sanitizer equipment within public and workplaces. 4. Increase cleaning and disinfecting of surfaces, including public transport and all public facilities, including schools, buses, play park equipment, shared water access points, public restroom, amongst others. 5. Anyone with symptoms of a dry cough, high fever, and shortness of breath should avoid public places and rather call the toll-free number as is displayed on the screens, or consult a health facility or a community health worker to be advised on what to do. 6. Businesses are required to keep a register of customers, recording the time of patronage, full name and contact details to assist with possible contact tracing. 7. The public is urged to cooperate with authorities in maintaining the health of the populations. What are the measures under stage 4? These measures, they are applicable to 13 regions with the exception of Orongo region. Education. Face-to-face instruction for grade 11 and 12 shall continue countrywide except for the local authority areas of Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arandes. The resumption of face-to-face instruction for early childhood development and pre-primary, that's from grade 0 to 3, is deferred across all 14 regions for a period of 2 weeks until Monday, the 6th of July, 2020. Points of entry. Points of entry will remain closed except for the transportation of imported goods. Government will conduct a targeted tourism initiative from 15 July to 15 August 2020 in collaboration with the private sector. Public gatherings. Public gatherings during this period shall not exceed 250 persons. This includes weddings, funeral, and religious gatherings. Members of the public must strictly adhere to health and hygiene protocols, such as mandatory wearing of face masks in public, hand washing and sanitizing, maintaining a safe physical distance of not less than 1 meter between persons, and logbooks with full personal details to assist with contact tracing. Cross-border movements. As from the 30th of June 2020, all Namibians and non-Namibia entering the country must submit to a COVID-19 PCR test on arrival and mandatory government-supervised quarantine at own cost. Citizens who cannot afford to quarantine at own cost may apply to be quarantined at cost to government. Namibians, permanent resident permit holders, and categories of professionals with valid work permits as defined in the regulation should notify the Namibian Embassy and High Commission of their intent to travel to Namibia not less than 2 weeks prior to departure for coordinating purposes. Only categories as defined will be granted entry into the country. All non-Namibians must present a negative COVID-19 PCR test result valid for 72 hours before entering Namibia. The following businesses will be permitted to resume activities under Stage 4, subject to the health and hygiene guidelines stipulated under section above, and in fulfilling the following additional requirements. Guidelines for number of persons inside an establishment to be revised from 2 square meters per person to 1 square meter per person as per directives of the Ministry of Industrialization and Trade, with strict enforcement of health and hygiene protocols with no less than 1 meter between persons. This measure is intended to facilitate and increase the number of patrons visiting various businesses without compromising public health consideration. Hospitality and tourism. The targeted international tourism revival initiative to be tried between 15 July to 15 August 2020 will accommodate a limited number of tourists from a carefully selected market on the basis of its epidemiological profile. All tourists traveling to Namibia must present a negative SARS-CoV-2 PCR test results valid for 72 hours before entering Namibia and submit to mandatory testing upon arrival. All tourists must submit to mandatory 14-day quarantine at a government-certified establishment at our cost. Allow 1 incubation cycle at the end of the initiative for monitoring and assessment. Liquor outlets, shebeens, and bars. Businesses may operate under normal working hours, but limit the sale of alcohol to from 9 o'clock in the morning to 18 hours, Monday to Saturday, subject to the applicable liquor license. No sale of alcohol will be permitted on a Sunday. Buying and selling of alcohol is only permitted for takeaway. Consumption of alcohol is only permitted in private dwellings. Only holders of a valid liquor license will be permitted to operate. Adhere to guidelines for a number of persons inside an establishment, that is 1 square meter per person. Casinos, nightclubs, and gambling houses. Casino and gambling houses to only open for a pre-booked clients and no walk-ins. Informal gambling houses to maintain a logbook. Selling and consumption of alcohol on site is permitted. Buying and selling of alcohol for takeaway is prohibited. Adherence to strict health and hygiene protocols, including the wearing of face masks and guidelines for number of persons inside establishment, that is 1 square meter per person. Logbooks to be maintained at all premises. Sporting events and activities. These are permitted to resume, including contact sports as defined in the regulation, subject to adherence to the public gathering limit of 250 persons and the health and hygiene protocols. Penalty of violating above regulations. Non-compliance with regulation is a punishable offense. For owners of nightclubs and gambling houses, the penalty may include suspension of the operating license. The penalty for violating Stage 4 regulation is a fine of 2,000 Namibia dollars or arrest. Now, measures for Erongo region with special dispensation for Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arandes local authority areas. The Erongo region will migrate from stage 1 to stage 3 at 23 hours 59 minutes, Monday, 22nd June 2020, until 23 hours 59 minutes, Monday, the 6th of July 2020, for a 14-day period or one incubation cycle. Travel between towns in the Erongo region and to the rest of the country will be permitted, with the exception of the Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and Arandes local authority areas. Travel within and between Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, and local authority areas will be permitted. Travel into and out of these local authority areas to the rest of the country will be restricted to emergency situations only, as defined in the regulations.
people congregating, we are saying, I want to maybe say through you, Your Excellency, that heads of institutions and hosts must please ensure that people's information is kept confidential. The other health protocols and hygiene requirements, of course, is sanitation and physical distance. I do want to raise another issue, Your Excellency, with your permission, is the question around fake news. Since the start of the state of emergency, the government has been consistent in the manner in which it communicates COVID-related information. It comes either at an event like this through the head of state or the Minister of Health and Social Services, usually at a COVID-19 update, or other authorized ministers, particularly Ministry of MICT also has a responsibility. There's been lots of information that has been circulated around, for example, whether or not there's going to be a lockdown. What I want to confirm through you, Your Excellency, is that the channel of communication has been very clear from our side, and any other information that does not come through this channel is, for us, for all intents and purposes, fake news. And as you know, under our regulations, consistently, fake news is a criminally punishable offense. And finally, Your Excellency, if I may, I do want to just caution that members of the public must not stigmatize either people from Walvis Bay, Swakopmund, or the Erongo region, or truck drivers. I think what we need to learn is that this is a process, and we find ourselves in this situation as a collective, and to stigmatize or discriminate against people because of the situation in which they find themselves, I think is not the proper thing to do. We are all here to contain the further spread of the virus, and the measures that the government is taking really is to combat, prevent, and control the further spread of the virus. I will pause here, and if there are any other questions, and or if the Attorney General wants to maybe point out a few things specifically relating to the regulations, I'll give over to him. Through you, Your Excellency. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Thank you, Excellency. Thanks, colleagues, members of the media. Without going into the details that has been outlined by Your Excellency or the Minister of Health and the elaboration by the Minister of Justice, I just want to highlight key areas that comes with the relaxation of these restrictions, particularly for Erongo, moving from stage 1 to 3. There will be some relaxation there that will allow certain movements, opening of businesses. However, I want to highlight the issue of compliance, which has been emphasized before, simply to say that with this relaxation, there will be more shift to compliance. We will expect citizens to comply with the directives, with the regulations, and with the guidelines that shall be put in place to make sure that this exercise is successful. The reason why we do this, we want to save lives and to make sure that we combat this pandemic. The second point is enforcement. This obligation does not only lie with the law enforcement officers, it goes with the health workers, members of the security forces, and also members of the public. We have an obligation to ensure that our members of the public comply with the regulation directives. We feel that by allowing people to have some sort of freedom and allowing business to come back to normality gradually, that will help to restore the economy, at the same time save lives. But if members of the public are not supporting the government in ensuring that this process is properly managed, we may go back to stage 1 or stage 2 of the state of emergency. Thirdly, I want to also emphasize the issue of industry support. As we all know that there is an issue of truck drivers, there is an issue of employees or employers who shall be required to carry out certain obligations in terms of the regulations. I therefore want to appeal to the sectors, private sectors, to support government in all the efforts to ensure that government is successful in combating COVID. Then the last point is the issue of public education. This government has already started doing through various sectors and various institutions. I therefore want to urge that the private sector will also play this role to make sure that we educate our employees, members of the public, and also to educate ourselves how to combat and how to make sure that the regulations and directives that has been put in place to combat COVID are effectively implemented at our workplace in the other forums where we have influence. There is also an issue of permits, especially for Erongo. The movement of people from in and out Erongo, in particular to the 3 municipal areas, is also regulated. To move into Erongo or out, all is required is to register. There shall be a register at the control points where people must register with full particulars, and full identity shall be then required. Now, moving in and out of Walvis Bay, Arandes and Swakopmund, you shall be required to have a permit. Of course, the system of requiring a permit has not been properly used in the past, but we shall make sure that this time around it's properly implemented, and only people with valid reasons shall be able to travel in and out of those 3 towns, with the main purpose to really to control the movement of people and to make sure that only people with case of emergency or people who are providing essential services are allowed to move. With those few words, I thank you.
Now, all the experts who are sitting here are here to help me to answer questions. So why don't we go to is there anybody else who wants to say something? Why don't you cover it under questions and answers as experts? Any questions?
Good afternoon. My name is Jemima Bakers from Namibian Sun newspaper. Dr. Shangula, I have been informed that you and your executive director, Mr. Nangombe, attended the funeral of Dr. Shimi over the weekend at Omathia, and in attendance were more than 500 people.
Speak soft.
Dr. Shangula, I've been informed that you and your executive director, Mr. Ben Nangombe, attended the funeral of Dr. Shimi over the weekend at Omathia, and there were more than 500 people in attendance. Can you please comment on that? I'm not sure, perhaps it's a bit too early, but are we in a position to project a peak in terms of infections at this point? And then there are Namibians who are here to return from abroad to Namibia. Will government still pay for their mandatory 14-day quarantine when they enter the country, or how will this be handled going forward? I also want to know, will we continue with targeted testing, or are we considering rolling out mass testing in light of the increasing infections in Walvis Bay? There are some experts saying that we need to test at least 0.5% of the Namibian population in order for us to be able to determine a peak. Are we looking at that? Thank you very much.
Yes? Next.
Good afternoon. My name is Shamin Gashir from the Namibian newspaper. I have a few questions, actually. I would like to find out, the failure by government to pay contractors on time has resulted in 30,000 jobs being lost by the construction sector, as announced last week by the Construction Federation. How much does government owe to the running contracts with local contractors, and when is this going to be settled? In terms of the SADC region, I wanted to find out, a failure by the SADC region to come up with coordinated plan in the movement of goods by road, mostly by truck drivers, is seen as one of the many reasons for the increase of the virus. In Namibia and other states, How are you working closely, and how often are you consulting with your fellow regional leaders to deal with this issue? This is for the President. And then confirmations by the Ministry of Environment. Well, it was addressed, but I still have a question on this. Recently puts the cumulative loss from the tourism industry at about 20 billion. If foreign tourists don't come for months, how is government going to subsidize this amount and safeguard jobs in this industry? From a fiscal point of view, for Mr. Shimi, it looks like the 8 billion released by government to safeguard the economic losses has not been sufficient, and retrenchments across sectors continue unabated. What is the medium and long term from you as the fiscal chief to stop the high job losses, as well as inject life into the economy? This is also for the Ministry of Safety. I would like to find out, inmates are complaining that they are 30 in a cell, and one of the reasons is that there is no social distancing. Just at the coast, or at Valdes, 3 of the correctional officers had tested positive for COVID. How is then safety ensuring that these inmates are safe and protected from contracting COVID-19? And then maybe for Mr. Shimi as well, how many government guarantees have been used by individuals and businesses since the first stimulus package was announced? Thank you.
Afternoon, Mr. President. My name is Joseph from the Namibia Daily News. We are hearing complaints from Wavispai. Even the councillor complained that they are running out of beds to isolate these victims that are getting infected because the cases are increasing. I just want to ask what the government is trying to do, or the Ministry of Health is trying to do to mitigate this risk of people not having isolation beds. And also, I wanted to know what happened to the isolation facility that was supposed to be built in Wavispai. My second question is, on what basis is the government basing, on what evidence is the government basing its decision to migrate from stage 1 lockdown to stage 3 instead of stage 1 to stage 2, given the risks that exist in the Rongo region, because it's a hotspot now for the virus? Thank you.
That's it. Of course, in free place, you come prepared to deal with issues that you came to convey to the nation. But there are sidetracking. So, Minister, can you answer the people you are controlling at the funeral?
Thank you very much, Comrade President. And thank you very much for your questions. I hope I have got them, all of them. The first question from the Namibia Sun was the attendance at the funeral of the late Dr. Hage Geingob. Is that correct? All right. Yes. Dr. Hage Geingob has been a staff member of the Ministry of Health and Social Service. She served the ministry and the Namibian nation for many years, starting Oshakati, Tsumeb. She was the head of the Tsumeb hospital, a very capable person. Was transferred to head Katutura Hospital, did an excellent job, and then transferred to Windhoek Central Hospital during critical times, excelled herself, and then in the later years of her life, she was the chief medical officer for the Oshkoto region, and also served as the acting regional director for that region. So she did quite well, and the ministry appreciate her contribution to the health sector for the Namibian people. And when she passed on, obviously we have to pay due respect to her as a colleague, as a patriot, and therefore the Ministry of Health, as the employer, have to be represented at the funeral. So the names of those who would attend the funeral were communicated to the organizer, and those who were mandated to attend the funeral did so, including myself as the head of the delegation from the Ministry of Health and Social Services. Obviously, we do not have any control over the number of people who attended. That's entirely up to the organizer. But my observation is such that, yes, indeed, because of her contribution, so many people did attend her funeral. But it was also pleasant to note the extent the public have understood the messages which were given. And indeed, there was proper social distancing, and indeed, everybody had a mask on, and indeed, continually, the attendees have been reminded to observe social distancing at all times, and also hand washing and sanitizing. All of these measures were in place. And she received the proper send-off as a patriot, as a Namibian daughter. Your next question was about the payment of quarantine facility. Is that correct? Payment for the quarantine. Was that your question? Payment for the quarantine. Yes. The policy is that people currently, as the practice is currently, is that everybody who enter Namibia, of course those who are allowed to come to Namibia, they are quarantined for a period of 14 days. Everybody who is identified as a contact of a COVID-19 positive person is also quarantined. During the quarantine, those in quarantine facilities, they receive all the necessary support, including psychosocial support, daily monitoring, counseling, and daily monitoring also. And this is at the cost of government. And the change will come, as has been announced during the President's statement, and also when I announced the guidelines, which will be implemented going forward. So those are the arrangements. You also asked about mass testing in the Walvis Bay area. Yes. Well, I have been repeating on several occasions and several forums that we do not use the word mass testing. What we are saying is the expanded, targeted testing, and that is what we have been practicing, and this has been reinforced in the Walvis Bay area. And this morning I also announced cases which were detected through active case search. So we are targeting specific areas where we are suspecting to be possible source of transmission. So that is what we have been doing, and that's what we will continue to do. But it is an expanded, targeted testing. I'm not sure, I think you had a fourth question which I did not quite get. And if you don't mind to repeat it, I will obviously.
Doctor, I was asking if we are in a position at this point to determine when we will see a peak of infections. Thank you.
When the what?
Whether, are we at a position where we are right now, are we able to determine when we will see a peak of infections?
Like the highest number of infection rates that we are projecting. When is the peak?
Or when is the peak?
Yes, do we have an idea?
Okay, no, I got your question. Thank you. Well, we are doing some modeling, but depending on the different attack rates, which will then give us what we might be expecting. But of course, modeling is one thing, the situation on the ground is a different thing. What we are mostly relying on, we are relying on active case detection, and then from there we will see what is really the situation on the ground. And so far, I must admit that this has worked very well. This has worked very, very well for us.
Let me just start on the important one about how the region is cooperating. My colleagues, I must say we have direct telephone conversations. I don't go through even their assistants. With all the Southern African leaders, I have their direct telephone numbers, so that therefore, even 2 days ago, we'll be talking many things, including medicine that they were for our government is ordering directly. We discuss those kind of things directly. We are talking about how we try services with the
Thank you. And the economy can start to generate more jobs. It's really to try and mitigate the risk. With the opening up, we don't help them to the economy should allow them to generate their employees.
There was an airline called Pan Am. solidarity.
Thank you, Comrade President. I would like to respond to a question about the inmates at Walvis Bay. Yes, one of our staff officers there tested positive. You were following the development, and as a result of that, the whole prisons complex was subject to test and what is the word when you are sanitized, making sure that everything else is sanitized. So as a result of those tests, 2 more or so were found, or 3, to be positive of this virus. They have since been isolated, but we are continually monitoring the situation as it's unfold. But so far we have not yet taken any other decision but to monitor that situation as it's developed. But so far it is stable and it's not very frightening. So far we are confident we will contain the spread. But should it develop to an extent that other measures will be taken, we will definitely cross that bridge as we get there. But so far the situation remains that those that are found are isolated and everyone else's status is known. So I think I should just explain that so far. Continue to monitor this is developed. Thank you.
Yes, second round.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. A very good afternoon, Namibia. In this moment, I represent the flagship Afrikaans daily called Republikein. My name is Denver Kisting. Your Excellency, I just have one question for you and then 3 questions, very easy ones for 3 ministers, please, if you may. The solidarity that you just shared with us, that you experienced when you were in the United States of America, wouldn't it be a great gesture to also see some of that solidarity extended towards Namibians who are suffering at the moment from the chambers of top government officials?
I'm talking about private sector. Government officials, we can't remember some times ago I asked them to contribute, and it was difficult for the civil servants because they have to agree. But politicians, we took a decision and we contributed. Do you remember that? So private sector, what are you doing? I talk about private companies.
Thank you.
Private companies, example, Pan American Airlines, talk about private sector. Some are even saying, even companies which are 80 years old, they must have surplus. But can they not let it come in? Look at South Africa too. Billions were pledged by private people, business people. We're talking about that.
Thank you, Excellency. I've got a question for the Minister of Education, Arts and Culture. I'm very happy to see you here today, ma'am. Teachers who are regarded as vulnerable people, would they be allowed to continue working from home? And if yes, how would that impact output? In the same vein, there are parents whose children are at private schools who complain about school fees, and they're being threatened that if they stop paying school fees for these private institutions, forfeit their place at these schools. What do you make of those threats? And then I've got a question. Come the 30th of June, Namibians who return home are then subject to COVID-19 in the event of some justice. And you do they need my, and what happens if it provides? Lastly, has any additional conduct deemed to be criminalized in the next COVID-19 positive identity. 250, 60 people here during stage. Them there, and if yes,
some of these people also suffer from certain medical conditions that they cannot have access to medication or medical care in Angola. Is the ministry doing anything to assist them, any special arrangement to assist them in coming back, since they cannot afford the flights, and also because they need medical attention which they can only access in Namibia? And then also the last time we asked, how far is the translation of information with regards to COVID-19 from English to other languages? And then to the education minister, we do know that there are a number of people, since the face-to-face, resuming of face-to-face, at some points, and also just the fact that the whole breaks that came within the education. Can you please give us just a clear picture of the state of education in Namibia? And then also, I don't see the labor minister here, but maybe the justice minister can assist with this. With regards to retrenchment, we know that it is illegal. It's legal to retrench. But what is the government doing, especially the labor ministry and maybe also the justice ministry, in making sure that the companies and businesses don't take advantage of this situation and just take advantage of the fact that retrenchment is legal, and also reducing in the people's salaries or packages, taking advantage of this? And then my last question is also to the Minister of Justice and then to the Health Minister. If I got you correctly, Dr. Shangula, you said that there was indeed more than the 50 people at the funeral. Have these people who have been there did they pay a fine? Have they been fined? And also, are we saying that does it depend on who it is who is getting married, whose funeral it is, that we can excuse that the number exceeds the regulation? And also, have you been fined, or did you pay a fine for being at an event where there are more than 50 people? That is it.
Good afternoon, Your Excellency. Good afternoon. My question is also to Dr. Shangula. You mentioned the establishment of a private tourism initiative. I guess it's in line with trying to stop the bleed in the industry. Could you please elaborate on what that initiative entails? The tourism initiative that you mentioned in your statement. And then also the WHO. We expect the COVID-19 to be with us for some time. The WHO says that it expects some vaccines to be developed before the end of the year, and then definitely fully fledged by 2021. What is your information in that regard, Dr. Shangula? Your Excellency, we also see Dr. Eric Juban here. It's the first time we see him at this briefing, the CDC country director. I was wondering if he has got any expert opinion to share, since he's around. Thank you, sir.
The gatherings are very difficult things. I was watching a rally in America, political rally. I think there were a lot of maybe close